So Nate has done it. He's finished his contractor storage yard. He's calling for inspection today. The inspection will happen tomorrow. If that goes well, or even reasonably well, he'll be open for business. Now, he's not quite done with some of the details around the chain link and the latches and that sort of thing, but he's done with all the major things. So it's going to be fun to show you this because it's not a typical storage facility at all. You may not have seen anything like it. You don't see them very often, but maybe there would be a use or a need for one where you live, possibly. Personally, I think it's really a pretty brilliant idea. So Apache Super Storage, there were some reasons that he called it super storage. It's not a typical facility, but it is a storage facility, and so all of those marketing decisions and trying to second guess what will bring people to his business, which just has to happen. The Apache piece, which I think perhaps, well, it's certainly not politically correct, and some of you have recognized that, is because it is sitting on Apache Trail Road on the boundary of the town of Apache Junction, in the part of the world where the Apaches lived for however long they lived before the collision between our cultures destroyed their way of living. There's no disrespect intended here. There is rather a recognition of where it's located and the address so people can find it. So anyway, I just can't wait to show it to you. I'm really proud of Nate's accomplishment here. It's something that I was never able to do as a young man. Don't know if I could do it as an old man. The thing that was trickiest about this project was threading the needle with the regulatory agencies. The work is just work, but the permission and the compliance piece was hard, but he's done it. Let me show you. So you guys have seen these gates go in. You saw they were big and we drug them around and saw Antonio working on them and welding them. It's kind of neat to be standing here next to it now because I designed it at home on a piece of printer paper, and now here it is. As it turned out, we designed in a real exposure, and that is, it's a giant wind sail. It's gusting here right now 20 or 25 miles an hour. We had to put this dead cat wind muffler thing on the microphone. And an expansive sheet metal this size takes terrible pressure, and so that sort of built in some complication for Nate. But the cool thing was, we put up that video of those gates, and several of you said, whoa, the wind's going to tear that off, and how are you going to manage that? And a guy named Kyle Thompson, who is a manager for a gate company in California, automated gate service, I think. We're going to have their contact information in the notes. He reached out, hey man, that's a problem. You know, it's going to be hard to find an opener that will withstand the forces on a wind sail that big that it's got to withstand without just getting, you know, just folded up like a taco. So he engaged with Nate in email and phone calls and parts and suppliers and facilitate and order, and he just went out of his way to provide this beauty. This is about as macho a gate opener as you can get. It is as tough and as bulletproof as any on the market. One of the things that Kyle brought to the table that some of you had mentioned was a magnet. So there is a magnet here that has 1,300 pounds of direct resistance to pulling. 1,300 pounds. And that may not be enough to resist the whole load of the wind, but it ties these two gates together so they're acting as one piece. And this one's pinned to the ground very sturdily. So the hope is, you know, that this thing's going to take it. If it doesn't, then, you know, the classic phrase, if you don't have time to do it right, what makes you think you're going to have time to do it twice? Well, he couldn't do it any other way than this because this was what was on the permits and he had the approval and it was time to move forward. But if this system fails for any reason, then we'll just get back in here and redesign a sliding gate system that will run out over the retention basin. We don't think it will, but if it does, that'll be plan B. So now you get a look at it. This is a contractor storage yard. This is conceptualized and built for people just about like me, or if you've got a couple excavators and a skid steer and a dump truck, or if you've just outgrown your garage with whatever you're doing and you just don't quite fit anymore. This is a combination of storage yards and shipping containers. So you can have more than one, or just a container, or just a storage yard, or a yard of different sizes. It's got 6-foot privacy chain link with barbed wire on the top, so it's secure. I wouldn't want to try to get over this fence. And it's readily accessible. It's in a nice location. It could be that it would be a real boon for somebody who's right in that early stage of growing the business, or maybe There's a big outfit on the other side of the valley that needs a little satellite yard, so the employees on this side of town have a spot anyhow. So I think it's useful. But it's rolling the dice. It's taking your best shot at what market you think might exist and do the market research that you can and look for similar facilities and try to talk to the owners and see if they have vacancy rates and try to add up, and then when he gets right down to it, you just let the clutch out and go ahead and hope that you're on a good course. But I think he's on a good course, and I just can't wait to see how this rents up. So these shipping containers, overseas shipping containers, are a cool thing. I mean, they are secure. Those doors, you're not getting into those doors if you don't have the key. And they're heavy. They're 8,000 pounds, which means they're hard to get exactly where you want them. Now he's got 18 of them on this site, and they had to be set really pretty close to where they needed to be in both directions. It was a vertical learning curve. You've seen and you will see some footage of just how tricky it is to get them on site, in place, get the truck away, and then what are you going to do with them once they're on the ground? So this entry, the road, is 38 feet wide, and each yard has a 20-foot opening. Two gates, two 10-foot gates that swing open to give you a 20-foot net opening for backing in or pulling out. I think it's going to be really pretty easy to utilize these yards. The storage containers access out into the drive so that they can either be included with the rental of the yard or rented separately if all you need is a storage container. I think it's an innovative and really effective way to provide a service for people who are growing a construction business. As you can see, there's not a lot of complicated construction process here. Block wall, chain link, storage containers, but there was some fairly complicated and very specific drainage issues that had to be dealt with. So this north end of the project, this 17-foot opening and this spreader basin was all required by the county to deal with a 100-year flood event. Their premise was that when that catastrophe happens, the miles of subdivisions, or however many houses and however much development up here that's funneling all their water right down through this gutter onto Nate's property, has to be accepted with no water backing up at all, no resistance to flow coming down through this drainage system at all. So as the water drops in here, this riprap is in place to keep the turbulence from eroding the dirt, spreads out in this spreader basin and heads down here to the east, fills up this area, and then works its way around the corner down this drainage swale, which is, I don't know, maybe 500 feet long, down the perimeter of the property. So this drainage swale is recreating what Mother Nature did, and that is drain this whole area south and east. So we're on the east side of the property, and the drainage swale drains to the south. As it comes out of the spreader basin, you're going to get a little turbulence right here. So once again, the riprap is controlling the turbulence to minimize erosion, and then the water just moves right on down the property, behind the storage containers, behind the large contractor yards, until it gets to the retention basin. So this is kind of at the top end of the project. It's a hammerhead turnaround. You got handicapped, accessible storage right there. This is going to slide back so that all this pad is fully usable by someone in a wheelchair. Nate's office, and then the hammerhead would be for, a few employees of a contractor to park, or for turning around a big trailer. It's just sort of the termination of the project with the service and the hand cleaner, and just sort of a token effort to civilize a construction site. So we're still on the east side of the project, and as you can see, there's no chain link behind these storage containers, behind these shipping containers. That's because this is the larger side of the project. The access road is weighted towards the west side, so the yards on that side are considerably smaller, the yards on this side are considerably bigger, and it could be that one renter would want to take the whole space that's left, or have it divided in some way that is customized for a particular purpose, a particular business. So Nate is going to wait to establish the boundaries on the larger yards on this side of the project until the renter shows up and can tell him how much space he really needs. all of the water, everything that comes off from off-site and that falls from the sky finds its way into this drainage swale, works its way to this point, which is the retention basin. This holds it. This captures it and holds it until it percolates into the ground. Now, percolation is usually pretty slow when you have a lot of fines and sort of clay particles in the soil like this along with the aggregate. But there's a dry well in here, a commercial dry well, and it's a serious structure. So at this inlet, this grate, which has got to be protected so nobody falls in here, the water drops in. It comes up a distance before it finds its way through a lateral pipe over into the actual dry well. There's sort of a strainer separator mechanism in there, which I assume is intended to separate any oils or other easily separated pollutants that might be in the surface water before it goes into the ground. The inlet and the dry well are connected by a 4-inch piece of PVC. I'm standing over a concrete vault that is placed on top of a hole, ready for this? 6 feet in diameter and 120 feet deep, and it's filled with washed rock. Visualize the simple beauty of this. The water drops in, it's strained, it travels over in this direction and falls into essentially a bottomless hole. Any amount of water that comes in here is going to find its way out. This had to be tested. There was an elaborate rotation of water trucks that Nate had to hire to come in and pump into this dry well at a specified rate with somebody to observe and make sure that the water level did not begin to rise in any way that anybody could tell. He passed with flying colors, but this is where the water goes. So the retention basin is right next to the gate where we started. It's big enough, it's steep enough, the water would be deep enough that you don't want anybody getting in there. It's sort of like a swimming pool at a house, right? You don't want the neighbor kid falling in when the conditions are wrong. But we've made a circuit. We started out at the gate, we went right up the middle of the project to what is the north end, came back down the east side to the retention basin, and we're back at the gate. There have been lots of questions about the weep holes in the walls. Why did you turn those blocks on their side? What's the purpose of that? Well, maybe you can see now that so much of this site is engineered around dealing with water. These weep holes, those blocks on their side, are all about water. If the time comes that A, the water that gets on this site is starting to raise and the blocks built a giant swimming pool, those weep holes let the water out. Or B, if it's a Noah's Ark kind of a flood event and the water coming at the site from off-site runs into the wall that's been put around the perimeter, the weep holes will let the water go through uninterrupted without raising the water level on the other side of the wall and damaging other people's property because this site was approved. So those weep holes are just a way to allow water to pass freely in both directions across the property line. Now the next thing is, so Nate was talking to me a lot as he was looking for property and talking about, how he might think about doing something like this. And he found the property and it was kind of a marginal piece and he negotiated just, I think, He did a great job of negotiating for the property, and part of that is due diligence. You can learn about that on our Spec House series. And as part of the due diligence, when he had the property sort of secured but not owned, he went to the county and said, hey, is this going to work? I want to put shipping containers on there for storage. And they said, great idea. And he said, are those buildings? No, those are not buildings. Those are shipping containers. Great. 5 months later, when he owned the place, when he was committed, when he was moving forward with engineering and acting on what they told him, now the deal changed. And no, these are not storage containers, these are buildings. These are commercial buildings, and so they need to be on foundations. Well, that's a radical cost change. So he was able to find a solution that seemed, at least on the face of it, better than a foundation, that an engineer would approve, and that is these arrowhead hold downs. These drive into the ground. You put a drive rod on that little tenon and put it on a jackhammer and drive them into the ground, and it pulls the cable with it, and at a specified depth you stop driving them and tie it onto your commercial building. And the engineer, bless his little heart, specified 12 of them per unit. So there's 6 on each end, and that's what these are. They are not, as you might have assumed, to prevent the storage containers from being stolen. They're to prevent the storage containers from... Well, I've made a mistake. I've been assuming that you know who Nate is. Maybe some of you are new to the channel and don't know that Nate is my oldest son, and he and I are doing this channel. He's the cameraman, he's the editor, he answers most of the emails, he does all the brain work, and this is his project in Mesa. It's not in Oregon. So I've twisted his arm, and he's promised, okay, he hates being in front of the camera. He's not the showboat that the old man is, okay? But he's promised that he'll get on the camera on Patreon and tell you all about all the costs and all the things that he wished he would have known before he started this project, all of the complexities around getting the engineers to provide what the county wanted and getting the county to decide what they wanted and commit to what it is that he had to do to please them, and you know, how the contracts worked. And eventually, after he lays out all the costs, a year from now he'll circle back around and tell you whether or not he's making any money, which is, after all, the most interesting part of a project like this. So if you haven't met Nate, check it out on Patreon. You can find him on the channel occasionally. He's gradually coming around to this side of the camera. But we're having a fine time. This project is pretty much done. He should get his inspection this week and be ready to start pouring it on the Spec House. Thanks for watching.